You like manga?
Garugamesh!
Of course you do. It's the whole reason why you're subscribed to me in the first place. Right before I stopped making anime-related content. The great thing about manga is that you got all sorts of stories out there. You got stuff for the shonen lovers, the yaoi enthusiasts, the sports nerds, and whatever the fuck this is. But the one thing that manga has always been good at is that anyone can do it. As long as you're good at drawing, not necessarily though, you can tell whatever story you want. And plenty of people have used the medium of manga to express themselves. And one of those people is the artist Ezaki Bisco. He's the creator of the manga called Menhera-chan, which might seem like a simple girly pop manga, but the English translation for it is called The Wrist Cut Warriors. Because the thing is, it's a magical girl manga where the MC has to self-injure to transform. Because the thing about Ezaki Bisco is that he was part of a Japanese subculture called Menhera. It's a fashion subculture from Japan that's all about raising awareness about mental health and illness. And to do that, it has a very particular style. Syringe necklaces, decorative medical bandages, super baggy clothes, all covered in bright kawaii aesthetics. It's a subculture that's all about wearing your vulnerabilities and trauma on your sleeve. And through that, it raises awareness about the effects that mental trauma can have on someone. And Menhera-chan was no different. Ezaki Bisco used her not only as a form of emotional expression, but also as a way to show that these thoughts and actions can happen. And before you think that this character would be relegated to obscure corners of the internet, Menhera-chan is a super popular character, with Ezaki Bisco finding a lot of success through her. So what gives, right? What exactly is the Menhera subculture, and how did it get its start? And why is the subculture mascot a character that has to self-injure to transform? And the answer to all of that is a lot more complicated than you think. So you're probably thinking, there's a fashion subculture from Japan that glorifies mental trauma and illness. Not the weirdest thing that has come out from Japan, but yes, and also no. You gotta understand, the Menhera subculture might seem like it's glamorizing mental illness, with the fact that visually at least, the subculture is defined by combining the very shocking and grim imagery of mental trauma, such as box cutter knives or even self-harm, with the very bright kawaii aesthetics that Japan is known for. But that's kind of the point. The Menhera subculture, at its most basic, is advocacy. It's trying to raise awareness about mental health in a society where topics about mental well-being are generally avoided, especially in socially conservative countries like Japan. But Menhera fashion is also meant to be personally comforting, in a weird way. By wearing your trauma or the things that have affected you quite literally on your sleeve, you take control over it and aren't defined by something that many would see as a mark of shame. But don't take it from me. Take it from the members of the Menhera community themselves. Wearing Menhera fashion whilst waiting in a doctor's or therapist's waiting room helped me feel comforted. The clothing depicting what I was going through felt like a protective barrier around me, saying, "This is okay. You're doing the right thing. You will get better." And before you say that it still looks stupid or you just still don't get it, what if I told you that your favorite subculture looks stupid and weird? I didn't mean that as an insult, but hear me out. Subculture fashions, by their nature, have always been countercultural. It doesn't matter if you're a punk, a goth, a gyaru, or a fantasy larper, looking weird and absurd has always been the language of the underrepresented. For example, as Ross Saintler says in his book, Subcultures, The Basics, quote, "Japanese subcultures serve in part as resistance to the archetypical, rule-following, conformist salaryman, who works exhausting hours at a dull job, unquestioningly devoted to his work." And while Menhera fashion isn't anything super stylish, it is absurd. Absurdity has power. Absurdity, by its nature, is hard to control. It doesn't follow the rules that we think certain topics should abide by. And it's a huge reason why subculture fashion and symbols can seem super exaggerated. When you live in a system where certain topics or behaviors aren't encouraged or looked down upon, absurdity isn't a random XD YouTube thumbnail trying to shock you for the sake of it type thing. It's a physical way of expressing yourself in a way that the system can't control. And Japan isn't the only one to do this. While this example isn't fashion related, I still think it's somewhat similar. But in South Korea, during the protests against President Yoon Suk-yeol's unlawful use of martial law, thousands of Koreans marched out in protests by waving their K-pop lightstick wands. No, seriously, some of them were even reported to be singing and dancing to K-pop songs during the protest itself, which is actually a real form of protesting, by which people diminish the authority that they're protesting against by being intentionally silly or goofy. And this is why menhera fashion can look the way it does. By wearing plastic syringe necklaces or frilly eye patches, menhera fashion refuses the traditional way of talking about mental health and illnesses, ways that societies like Japan can use to shut down discussions about topics they want to avoid. But by being over the top and refusing to use the clean language that most people in society expect you to use when talking about mental health and illness, menhera fashion forces you to acknowledge it. Or at the very least, acknowledge that when it comes to mental health and illness, there's nothing clean about it. Damage is done. People's lives have been damaged and changed by such conditions, and that the best thing you can do is just portray it as honestly as you can. As Ross Heinfler says in the same book again, quote, "Resistance is not always directed towards the state, nor does it always take the form of public protests. It can be demonstrating new and different ways of life that lead to greater human flourishing." Now, this isn't to say that this form of resistance doesn't have its drawbacks. It should go without saying. If you yourself are easily triggered by images of self-harm, you should really tread carefully if you're going through this subculture. I'm not your dad, I can't tell you what to do. There's also the criticism that it glorifies having mental trauma and illnesses through the imagery that it uses. But honestly, after having researched so many Japanese subcultures, I just find that this is the natural byproduct of whenever you use parody. It doesn't matter if it's for raising awareness, for humor, or for dunking on someone that you don't like on Twitter. As with any forms of expression, the key lies in understanding the intent behind it and approaching it with sensitivity and respect. What if I told you that we haven't even gotten to the best part yet? Yeah, the fashion is cool, but some of the people behind it are even cooler. But one of them stands out from the rest, not just for popularizing it with a mascot that everyone loved, but also wanting to move away from the subculture because they didn't believe in it anymore.
Can you tell me who this is?
これはメンヘラちゃんって言って私が描いてるキャラクターなんですけど
Meet Menhera-chan, the yami kawaii heroine.
So the thing about the menhera subculture is that it's relatively new, meaning to say that there's not a lot of media representation for it outside of niche web mangas or obscure songs from doujin circles in Japan. And because of that, there's not really a lot for me to talk about in this section. This is usually the part of the video where I talk about the subculture's representation in Japanese media, like in anime or manga. But because the subculture is, again, relatively young, it hasn't really caught up to the media of the country that it's in. It's not like Gyaru or the Bosozoku, which have been a thing in Japan for so long that they've become established character and visual tropes. But the one piece of menhera media that I do want to talk about that arguably put the menhera subculture in the limelight is that of the character Menhera-chan. Menhera-chan is a satirical manga made by the artist Ezaki Bisuko. The character was initially made as a form of vent art by Ezaki Bisuko to cope with the stresses of college exams, as well as the difficulties of his own personal life since he was the child of very strict but divorced parents, made worse by his own grandmother who, in his own words, abused him and treated him like a freeloader. He also alleges that the neighborhood that he went to school at wasn't a particularly nice one, and that he was the victim of constant bullying. All of this is to say that his trauma and experiences not only impacted his art, but also his desire to do art. And you can literally see this in the Menhera-chan manga. Part of the reason why Ezaki Bisuko made the character look the way she does is because of his desire to challenge Japanese social norms. In his own words, quote, "I wanted to show people things that many may generally not want to see, but these are things that people experience." And just like the actual menhera fashion, Menhera-chan wears her trauma openly. She openly wears medical bandages for people to see. Her own self-injury marks are just out in the open, and she carries a box cutter knife everywhere she goes. And if you haven't picked up on it already, Menhera-chan is technically a magical girl manga, meaning to say that she has to transform and fight whatever goon she has to for that chapter. And in order to transform, she essentially has to, how do I say this without getting demonetized? Self-injure at the wrist. There's a reason why one of the English translations for Menhera-chan is called the Wrist Cut Warriors. Again, again, if you're curious about the subculture and mascot, please do tread carefully. While I don't think that you should indulge in impulses like this, ultimately, I am just a voice on the internet. I can't tell you what to do, I can only tell you what to expect. But even with all these things that most people would normally say are insensitive or out of touch, Menhera-chan has a huge following online and is the comfort character for many people. A lot of people found representation in Ezaki Bisuko's art and what he set out to do. For the first time, there was a mascot for people to rally around and put into image what they had felt and had gone through. The dude became an overnight subculture celebrity and was even invited to a fashion show at AX of all places. Now, this is where it gets a bit dicey because you can't really talk about Menhera-chan and its author without mentioning the plenty of controversies that he's been in. Like, no joke, here's Adi Harajuku's video that I watched to get a general understanding of Menhera-chan. The video is like 35 minutes long, but a solid 60% of the video is just going through the many controversies that he's been involved in. I even found this old Tumblr page that lists out individually each controversy that he's been a part of. Now, I'm not gonna go through all of them because it's very tough having to separate what is verified information and what's not. I don't want to feed the internet rumor mill. So here are some of the controversies that I feel are the most relevant and are confirmed. Number 1, still trying to do NFTs in the big 26. This one's not even a controversy. This one's just cringe. I thought this shit died out 4 years ago. Like, come on, man, what are you doing? You're an artist. You don't need some weird crypto shit to pad out your income. Number 2, he does not like it when you buy bootleg versions of his merchandise. Now, this one's understandable since he is an artist and quite literally survives off of his art and merchandise. And he has said that he's fine with people reproducing his merch as long as they're not selling it and only using it for personal use. But he has kind of developed a bit of a reputation for being very brash and abrasive when he does catch people selling or buying merch of his stuff. And he's even done this to his own fans, which caused a lot of complicated feelings, safe to say. But as a certified Southeast Asian man, I'm kind of with the community on this one. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to justify buying bootleg merch of anything. But one of the pains of being a Southeast Asianer that's into J fashion or J subcultures is that a lot of the things are scarily expensive. Again, while I personally still believe that you should buy directly from the artist, I also believe that culture shouldn't exist for only the people that can afford it. As a person from a second world country, I know the difficulties sometimes of wanting to be a part of a community that's more Western or East Asian centric. A lot of the stuff that he sells in his store cost a pretty penny, at least here in Malaysia. And finally, he tried to move away from the Menhera label and do his own thing called Yami Kawaii. Now, this wouldn't be super problematic. People splintering off and doing their own thing is a pretty common occurrence across the whole world. If not for the fact that Ezaki Bisuko tried to dead-ass trademark the entire term of Yami Kawaii for himself. In the same way that the Fine Bros tried to trademark the word react because of their own content, God, this reference dates me, Ezaki Bisuko tried to do the same thing, but on the basis that Yami Kawaii was its own thing that he himself single-handedly created. And you can kind of already see where this is gonna go. Many online people were asking things like, how do you even trademark a whole subculture? What does this mean for other potential subcultures and subculture fashions like Lolita or Decora? Can anyone just make a separate term and trademark that and claim ownership? And again, if you were there when the Fine Bros did it to the word react back in the 2010s, for Ezaki Bisuko, it basically played out the same way. Many people were disappointed with this move and simply saw it as another money-grabbing attempt. And there were those that felt slighted that when Ezaki Bisuko was distancing himself from the Menhera label, he said that there was no real Menhera culture. Many felt that it downplayed the collective efforts of the OG Menhera subculture fans that were there long before Ezaki Bisuko came along in popularizing the subculture. Now, the saving grace though is that ultimately this trademark was not upheld in Japan and it kinda hasn't really gone anywhere since. And if you want to hear more about Menhera-chan and its author, I really recommend Adi Harajuku's video as well as reading some of the comments. It makes for some good time-killing reading. But regardless of how people feel about the author, the character of Menhera-chan has been a comfort character for many people. And it arguably helped boost the popularity of the subculture and its fashion scene. The people that love Menhera-chan love Menhera-chan. And I think it says a lot about the power of being able to feel represented and seen. Yeah, the artist, according to the community at least, is a bit of an ass. That doesn't discount the importance of this character and how it's become a pillar for the community to lean on. And I think that's the part of subcultures like menhera that many people don't see. That behind all the discourse and the weird fashion and the drama, that there are real people finding comfort in something that they think understands them. And look, I get it. Sometimes showcasing these subcultures can be very dangerous, in a sense that it puts more eyes on it and that there's a higher chance of misunderstanding. I'm also very aware that on the internet it's easy to talk shit because of anonymity. So to help mitigate that, let me talk about my own experience of being menhera. So, fun fact about me. I had a really bad period in my life where I suffered from a really bad bout of depression. And even today, I can't really say that I fully healed or moved on from those specific feelings. It's an ongoing battle, one where your greatest enemy is your very own mind. And during this period, I got into reading the fantasy book series called The Stormlight Archives. And it's here that I found a small ray of hope. In the book, the main character Kaladin is horribly depressed, and it's not even an implied thing. The author Brendan Sanderson has outright said that he based Kaladin's depression on his own son's struggle with mental health issues. And I believe him. Kaladin is one of the most authentic and raw depictions of living with depression. And there were plenty of moments where Kaladin did things or had thoughts that were eerily similar to ones I had at my lowest point. But reading through the books and seeing Kaladin's journey, I felt seen. I just felt that at last someone put into words and actions the complicated tangle of emotions and half-formed thoughts that I could never hope to verbalize. In a corny way, and this is gonna sound super cheesy, I felt like Kaladin was fighting for me, fighting for my own place under the sun. And it's this feeling that's a huge reason why I personally don't find menhera fashion goofy or silly. Do I personally see myself wearing menhera fashion? Not really. It doesn't really seem like my cup of tea. But I'm not gonna knock on it and say that it's dumb or it doesn't make sense. We find safety and security in the most craziest of places sometimes. There's no difference between finding representation in a fashion style where you wear a box cutter necklace and finding it in a book series about magical swords. We all want the same thing: a place to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood. A place where the scars that we have are not something to be shamed about. Fashion subcultures like menhera aren't necessarily about aesthetics or trends. It's about recognition. It exists because just like how Kaladin became a way for me to verbalize how I felt, things like menhera fashion was a language for other people themselves. A way to not only be seen by the world, but a way to make sense to yourself.